Okay, everybody, here we are, Mondays with Mark Allen. I am with Tim Yount, who has been working behind the scenes since time began, actually, probably, but at least around 2014 to get women's triathlon as an official NCAA sport. There has to be 40 schools to get like the top rung recognition. They're at 39. They've been at 40. They've lost some schools. They're coming back. Anyway, just wanted to chat with Tim and kind of get an update on how things are looking out there for the women in NCAA triathlon.
Thanks, Mark. It's great to be here. Really appreciate you letting me come back on and talk a little bit about where we are at this big movement. It's exciting, still exciting times, and we're really revving up for a big 2024.
What are some of the things that are what's taking place, and kind of where's the next step of level of development for the women in NCAA as far as triathlon goes?
Yeah, you touched on it when you mentioned 2014, and that was really the first opportunity that we had to be part of the emerging sport process of the NCAA. Emerging sport is defined as a sport that the NCAA feels can emerge into a championship status, which is what we're vying for now, which means they pay for costs, they work the programs, they do a lot of support for the sport in general, which is obviously a very good thing. If you can cut costs for institutions, cut costs for us, that's where we want to be. So we are preparing for assessment right now, which means that in November, after our season, the NCAA will reach back to every one of our athletic directors and say, did you meet the base, what they call sports sponsorship requirements? And that is that we have to have every institution compete in 4 events with 3 finishers against at least one other varsity institution. And so that is exciting for us because that means we are through, if we get approval from this first step, we're now to the second step. The second step is where the athletic directors, what they call divisional council, comes together and they look at what we're able to do at previously and at the next level. And then the presidents come together and they review and assess where they think we can go as a sport. And then we close the final part of the assessment with the process of championship committee review. And that's when they will actually establish a fairly large budget to manage the entire championship program for triathlon at the NCAA level. Mm-hmm. So that was really positive. So we're hoping it's about a 2-year process. So that's why we're so excited about getting this process started soon, so that we don't have to wait that much longer for athletes to say they're part of the championship sport of triathlon versus the emerging sport of triathlon. Mm-hmm. So that's the biggest thing, Mark, that really being able to touch on that is very confusing for most people, but it's the part that is probably highest priority for us this year to make sure that all of our programs are aware of exactly what they need to do to actually get there.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty mind-boggling process, and you've been at it for, well, 10 years. So obviously there's a feeling within USA Triathlon that this has a lot of value. What is like the ultimate goal of hopefully the sport will get out of it, NCAA will get out of it, women, USA Triathlon? What's kind of like the bigger picture goal of it all?
Well, I think what we've been able to do the last several years as we've gotten closer and closer to assessment is to do exactly that, is to look at what the goals of this program should be if they've changed, and they haven't really changed over the last 10 years. Number one, what you look at USA Swimming, right? And what they've been able to do with creating Olympians of today, right? As they've pushed people through more Americans, hopefully, than international athletes. There are a lot of international athletes that go to NCAAs in swimming. But what track and field has done in the U.S. as well, become a feeder for the next level of athletes, whether that be U23 or whether that be elite or pros, whether that be draft legal or long course or whatever distance or discipline within the sport, is to really create that next tier of athletes that get to come through the program. That is probably the number one goal. The second goal is to continue to produce athletes who are part of varsity programs. You know, how awesome and amazing is it for someone to say, I competed in college triathlon, I was an NCAA athlete, and they can say they're an NCAA athlete, whether we're championship or emerging sport status. Mm-hmm. And to be able to say that means there's more people that we can inspire to step in and step up and be part of NCAA triathlon moving forward. I think the biggest hurdle that we have is to continue to find athletes who are not necessarily triathletes, that's important to capture those interests as well. But also single sport athletes, athletes that may be competing in running or in swimming, that might be looking to be a two-sport athlete in college, or want to switch over. Maybe they've been injured their entire career running, and what triathlon will do for them is to provide a platform perhaps for them to be healthy, truly able to recover for the first time in their careers. Maybe it's for that swimmer who's so used to two-a-days and long hours in the pool and doing all the other things that swimmers are expected to do, who wants to be able to come a step back and be a little bit less committed to a single sport and commit instead to this new sport of triathlon. Or again, for some that want to double up, you can do both of those sports, triathlon and swimming, because they're at different times of the year. So that would be a third prong of just establishing more roots into single sport athleticism, athletes who can find our sport something that changed their lives, because that's really at the crux of what we're trying to do, is to impact student athletes that have maybe never even thought about the sport of triathlon as a choice of option for them to do at the collegiate level. And here's the best part about it. Average aid is 65%. So if you get you get support, whether it be athletic aid or academic aid, the average for our current institutions is 65%. That means most of your education is being paid for, and you can probably find other funding to get support as you move through the paces of being a sophomore, junior, senior in college in part of our triathlon system.
Yeah, I'm sure that's pretty enticing for a few athletes or anybody who's going to college. You don't want to leave college with a huge debt if possible.
Yeah.
You know, I've spoken with a number of the athletes who have either gone to the Olympics or who will be going to the Olympics, and you know, clearly, like the project Podium, where I think it was Barb Lindquist was originally trying to identify those athletes like you're talking about in college who maybe have two of the sports or target on one, but they've done the other one, and then you bring them into triathlon. The prime example of how that worked was Gwen Jorgensen, our only gold medalist, came out of Rio in 2016 with that gold. She was part of that project, brought out of college and brought into the sport of triathlon. Clearly that worked, especially it seems to be effective for women. I've also spoken with Morgan Pearson, who he's already qualified for Paris this year. He qualified at the test event last summer. The only man so far who's on our list. He had a different view of it. You know, he said in the men's field, a lot of the guys he's competing against, they have been doing triathlons since they were young, since they were kids. You know, internationally, the French, the Germans, the Australians, and he said we don't have that same kind of development system here. So he said he's always felt like he's kind of behind the eight ball, and you know, he didn't actually really start doing triathlons till 2018. So here he is, only 6 years into his journey, competing against guys who have been doing this for at least twice that long in their life. So how does this sort of fit into that picture?
Well, it's a great example of how the collegiate recruitment program has been an amazing program for USA Triathlon. And when I'll answer with this. You go back into our history, starting with the first Olympic team in 2000 in Sydney, and work forward, you will find almost every one of our athletes has come through a single sport collegiate system. And most of them are Division I, Power 5, A5 programs, which big time programs. And it's staggering how many have done that. We've had a pretty solid junior program. And Miss Nib is one of the products of that junior program. Even though she didn't do triathlon collegiately, she ran at Cornell. But the idea is to continue to have this other prong of junior high-level racing, draft legal, create another extended avenue outside the collegiate recruitment program. And then NCAA becomes an opportunity for those that also want to get to the next level. So the HP athletes can choose to go NCAA or not. Sometimes they maybe want to better their position in a single sport and run or swim or do some other sport collegiately. Our hope, our goal, our push is for them to look at the different options that we have of the programs that are currently supporting the sport. So when we think about what we're doing inside of USAT, we have created a brand new youth program, which is going to be a feeder to our high school program, which we've recommitted ourselves to. after COVID, we were down to 4 high school programs. We're now up over 100, and we're going to continue to grow that out and grow the numbers and the interest. And then they get a feed into collegiate club, NCAA, or they can do neither. They might want to go into a club as a young elite. So all of a sudden, the Morgan Pearsons become part of that, because the collegiate recruitment program will also feed athletes into the higher level. But think about the number of prongs that we have now feeding into the elite level of athlete participation. It's expanded threefold at least, so that we have these situations where, like Europe and like Australia and other parts of the world, these athletes will come with a little bit more experience and insight, and probably be able to be more successful at younger ages to again drive 2 or 3, maybe 4 Olympic games that they may be part of. And that's part of the situation that we want to find ourselves. Not everybody's going to be a Hunter Kemper, where he can make an Olympic team at 36. I think that was what he was when he last qualified for the games. And so if we get that top level athlete at 21 or 22, be really, really ready to push the world's best, most elite athletes, that's where we ultimately want to be. And that's what we think we can get through the programs that we're creating.
Yeah, I mean, qualifying for the Olympics obviously is a great thing, but being competitive in the Olympics is a very different beast. And I saw this in Paris with just the depth of like the French guys, you know, whatever it was, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, I think it was, from the French athletes, and they all came up through that youth program and the leagues that they have to race. They've been doing that for years together, and they're so proficient at what they do. They don't make mistakes. And Morgan highlighted this. You know, he just said, I'm still playing catch up on these guys. They have so much more experience. So clearly, yes, maybe NCAA is like a middle step to getting that Olympic competitiveness going, but certainly having those high school programs also is going to be super important. Another thing I was thinking about is, you know, if we're just talking about numbers, I think you mentioned that the average number of women on the triathlon teams in the NCAA right now is about 8 or 9 athletes per school.
Yeah.
I actually coach a woman who graduated from Berkeley last year. She's in my Mark+Allen+Premium coaching on TriDot. And she was commenting that she still works out with the Triathlon Club at Berkeley, and they have about 150 members. Yeah. So, you know, if we're just talking about supporting a growth group, it seems like maybe those clubs are a place that could really be effective. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, you're exactly right. And I always talk about alumni of collegiate clubs, and I'm just shocked at the value and quality of athletes we get from that. And I'll speak one that has been a long course specialist, and he's been, you know, he's just recently retired. That's Tim O'Donnell. You know, here's a guy that was part of our club system, collegiate club system, many years ago, and our club system started back in the late 90s. But there's a host of other athletes that were also part. You know, Victor Plata, who was an alternate to the Olympic team in 2000, and then was able to make one. And all these people, and where did they come from? Well, they came from collegiate club, because there weren't NCAA options, and we don't have NCAA options for the men right now. But I think it's understated, Mark, that the collegiate club system is also another avenue through which we can reap some really incredible talent. And what we ultimately see is about 80% of the collegiate club athletes are learning and finding the sport for the first time, but they are typically coming from a single sport. So the number one sport that most people come from is some aspect of running. Swimming is second, cycling is third, and soccer is fourth. So when these kids start thinking about, do I want to join this triathlon club on a college campus? We have over 130 clubs. That was also decimated. It was down to 66 during the pandemic, right after the pandemic. We're now up to 126. We're going to be hopefully eclipsing our largest number ever, which would be 186 at the beginning part of next year, that we can continue to cultivate the talent that we can get from there. And the other thing that we're doing to help represent the talent build and growth is to get more coaches to volunteer to coach for, if not volunteer, for very small stipends, coach these club programs as well, again, to improve the experience, improve the athleticism, see improvements so that they can take the sport on at the next level, whether it be the age group level or at the elite or maybe it's a pre-elite situation for some of them to get their feet underneath them and understand what it takes to actually be an elite and then make that jump when they're ready.
Yeah, you touched on something there, just talking about age group. The pandemic really, the sport took a hit. A lot of race directors went out of business, the small groups. And currently, one of the things I keep hearing from athletes is they just feel like it's hard for them, even if they're interested in the sport and they're coming into it from a running background or a swimming background, it's hard for them to fathom like coming in and the first thing they do is a 70.3, let's say, or an Ironman distance. Maybe that's their ultimate dream, but they're like, I'm trying to find a race that I can go to. Have you, I mean, you've been around for a long time. Do you see a solution to some of the issues that we're facing on that level of athletes not being able to find those sprint races, those Olympic distance races that they got to cut their teeth on and get experience? And then from there, once they saw how cool it was, to then build up into those dream events that, I did it, I crossed that finish line. Because the way that I'm seeing it now, and this is just from my perspective, because there is a lack of really good quality short distance races, there's no series or anything that I know of. People do come in and basically they take 1 or 2 years, they do an Ironman, and then they're done because it wasn't like a real nice organic development process. What is USA Triathlon working on with that?
Yeah, I am bothered. I'll tell you that. I'm bothered when I hear about athletes who've never done the sport before say, my goal is to do a 70.3 or a full Ironman, and then I don't know what I'll do. And when you run the numbers or you have the conversations, a lot of them are like, whoa, that was a lot. That was a really big lift. I'm probably not going to do this again. But what they forget, and this is what we're trying to communicate, Mark, that I think is really important, is the number one distance for us right now is sprint. And it's growing at a rate greater than any other distance. And guess what the number 2 distance I think soon is going to be? It's going to be the super sprint distance, which is half of the sprint. And this isn't to say you're not a triathlete if you're doing these distances. It's saying that with my lifestyle as a person, I don't want to train 25, 30 hours a week because I'm not an elite. I have a life. I have a family. I have a job. I have all these other things I want to do. I want to be able to commit to the sport because I love what it means, what it does for me. And so what we're doing is we're reminding people, and this goes back to a theme that we created a couple of years ago, compete locally and race nationally, right? So you have the ability to stay closer to home and do some races and support your local race director or directors. And if you want to go to a national championship, or you want to go to Ironman, if you want to do a 70.3 worlds, you have the ability to do that. But let's actually see if we can get you to bite off a shorter distance race, a race that's close to home, keep costs down, and then create your A race if you have an A race you want to do, or go to one of our national championships as your A race. You certainly have and should consider that as an important next step. The other thing that we are sometimes trying to remind, I say sometimes, always, but it's not easily done, and that is remind people of it's not just triathlon anymore, right? We've got aquabike. For those that don't want to run, we have aquathlon. For those that people don't want to bike, don't want to have to worry about taking a bike with them on a plane or whatever the situation might be. You have duathlon if you don't want to swim. You have off-road as an option. You have indoor triathlon. You have a pool swim with an outdoor runner ride. You've got so many combinations of this sport that anybody that says, I can't run anymore because I have bad knees, well, guess what? You don't have to. You can do an aqua bike, right? So the messaging is clear that we want to continue to keep people engaged in the sports. We're doing a lot of stuff to make sure that their pathway is one that keeps them in the sport longer rather than one event and then out and bucket list done and check the box and I'm going someplace else with some other sporting group. And then reminding them that they can do this sport at whatever recreational level if they so choose by engaging new disciplines and new opportunities that maybe they hadn't even thought about before.
Yeah, well, you're preaching to the choir on all that stuff. I totally agree that if we can sort of elevate the status of of competing in shorter races, it'll be like it was actually in the early 80s. The US Triathlon Series was right up there with Ironman, and it was what everybody wanted to be part of. So how do we bring sprint, super sprint, Olympic distance races back online? How do we get them so that an athlete says, yeah, that's what I want to do, but I want to have it be simple. I don't want to have to drive 6 hours to find the race that I want to go to. How do we bring more of those races back into existence?
Well, you mentioned it when we started this conversation about COVID and the pandemic having an impact on the number of races. The good thing is that we're starting to see a resurgence again, where race directors who have maybe only produced a couple events are looking at adding certain distances to their current menu. Even with our high school build, we have a multitude of race directors willing to say, hey, Tim and Chad, the person who works with me on this, we're going to add a high school wave for you. We're creating a brand new youth series so that in every state we have youth series that are happening. And so through education, I do a race, I get an email from USA Triathlon saying, hey, here are a couple other races in your area you should consider. And one of them is a sprint distance race. We're doing a lot more social media outreach. So between individual pointed, targeted communications with our members, we're talking about social media outreach. So we have people that have never found the sport before are aware that the sprint and super sprint distances exist. Not that we're ignoring the long course races, but you know as well as anybody, when you ask someone who is a neophyte what they know about triathlon, the first thing they say is Ironman. And that's not a bad thing. It's just that they think that's what we're about. So we have to really supplant this notion of these are the options that really exist and are for the layman's what everybody can do. Any person that so chooses to do a super sprint, whether you walk the run or you dog paddle in the swim, or you have an old bike that you hadn't pulled out of your garage for 30 years, there's nothing to say that you can't do that. So that becomes part of the education as well, to say there is zero excuses accepted now for engaging our sport because of the distances and the opportunities. And if we can just control the registration fees, make it also affordable for them to do this, because we know for a fact that the agencies have kind of upped their game a little bit and are charging a little bit more for events to happen. And that pass down has to come through the race directors and the registry fees that they secure. But we're working with them on some solutions to hopefully keep it affordable for everybody, newbies or for veterans alike.
Yeah, we want to keep it so that people can not only find races, find a community, find good coaching, do it at a cost that's not going to, they're not going to have to sell their car to buy their bike, kind of a thing.
Well, in clubs, clubs exist as well. What better avenue to get discounts on races, discounts on equipment, free mentoring if you are new to the sport, the ability to travel with the club and hang out with people that have similar interests. That's the other angle that we're also pushing. We're at almost 900 clubs within the organization. And so that becomes important connection to races, to coaching, to NCAA, to high school, to collegiate club, and all these other areas of the sport that we're supporting.
Looking ahead to Los Angeles 2028, I'm kind of saying that's going to be my swan song. I'm going to be 70. After that, who the heck wants to listen to some guy who raced like 500 years before? But anyway, looking ahead to LA, that's actually barely only 4 years from now. How is the United States going to show up there as a superpower in the sport with potential to have multiple men and women on the podium?
Well, and I think what you said is the opportunity for us to showcase LA, to remind people who right now are maybe thinking, you know what, I'm a pretty good swimmer runner. I've never really thought about this sport, but if I'm going to get into the system of creating enough points to make myself eligible to be able to compete in different level races around the world, to be able to then be considered as a high option athlete, triathlete for an Olympic team, I'm going to have to start thinking about that after this year's games. And that process will start for many new people, perhaps, that are saying, this will be my foray into the sport. I'll give it one big shot for the games. When you go back over time as well and look at the host countries for Olympic Games, in all sports, not just triathlon, but the host country always rises to the top. And they are always a little bit more able and capable of performing at a higher level because it's in their home country. They're not dealing with food situation, not dealing with with climate shifts that you're not accustomed to. They're not dealing with stresses of various things because it's in your country, it's in your hometown. So our HP team, marketing communications, biz dev, all these groups are coming together to make certain that when we start truly thinking and securing the rights for the US to dominate the games in every one of our sports is going to be an Olympic team supported. We're going to be able to probably rise to the occasion. Now, we don't make that assumption based on well, let's just do the same things we've been doing and hope we get better results or different results. We know that's a failure if you do that. But it's looking at the ability for us to understand the course long in advance, right? To understand the expectation, having camps and clinics, and being able to get athletes to understand the kind of course it's going to be, and looking at technology and looking at equipment that could be really to our advantage at certain points in time, and training methods and systems that coaches will maybe make some advancements around that are coaches in living in the US, like you, Mark, obviously one of the top coaches in the world. There are always some things that we will do, being we're the home country, that we maybe wouldn't do for another country, because now the onus is on us to make certain that we have great success. And so that will see the goal of our team.
Yeah, I think just my devil's advocate mind kind of says 4 years isn't much time, though. Like this, that's a process that really should have, I think, been put in place 8 years ago, so that you have that ability to, hopefully get some people to Paris to get some experience, so then they can build on that, so that by the time they get to LA, and I go back to Morgan's example. He's basically been doing this 6 years. I mean, incredible athlete before, many-time All-American runner. Clearly, he's not starting from ground zero, as nobody is who's trying to make the Olympics, but it's taken him 6 years to actually get himself to that point where people, I think, are actually looking at him like, geez, if he's healthy, he has a shot at the podium. He was pulling away from Alex Yee and the entire pack first part of the run in Paris in the test event. But again, he's saying that's such a short period of time. And I spoke also with Ian O'Brien, who's coached many of the top Olympic distance athletes, very super good guy, a specialist in that part of the sport, especially. And he kind of echoed that. He said a lot of the success that he's seeing in the Olympics, it doesn't start 4 years before, it starts 8 years before.
Yeah, and I'll say this, that we got Project Podium, right, sitting in Arizona, and if you talk to our lead coach there, Parker, he's going to say that this is probably the most exciting moment that he's ever had, with the talent level that he's able to work with every day. And that's saying a lot, because you think about that, they would be very young age, but they're high school graduates, soon to be high school graduates, college aged kids who, 3 years from now could be 21, 22-year-olds, matching the young age of the best world's athletes. Like Yee was, what was he when he won a podium finish? He was 22, I believe, for GB. Wild, I think, was 21 or 22 from New Zealand. So I think there's the ability for us to maybe see the bright light that's out there for this young talent. And when we came home from Junior Worlds this past year, we had 3 male finishers finish in the top 10. Never happened in the history of our sport. And so that spoke very highly about where our men's potential might be. And I think on the women's side, because we have some young up-and-comers too, that they should be able to match the men's potential for doing great things as well. And so I'm a little bit more optimistic, and maybe I'm more optimistic being on the inside than I would be if I was on the outside, maybe not able to see, hear, and talk to the people who are talking about the talent pool that's coming, hopefully soon enough, for LA.
Well, that's great. That's good news for sure. So last question, put it on the line. Are we going to see some medals in Paris?
Of course, we're going to see some medals in Paris.
Right answer.
Yes. Mainly because I know our team that's going is a very experienced team. You talked about Morgan. I mean, this guy's never been more prepared for Podium than he is now, right? I mean, here's my little thing on Morgan. What I saw him do in the mixed relay was push beyond the edges of what I thought he could actually be. I think we were all a little nervous when Morgan got the anchor leg, right? It was moving through the people and doing what he needed to do, because he was up against some horses in that race, and he showed some gut that I just didn't think anybody would be able to have. And then he proved it with other races going head to head, as you noted, in Paris, the test event, and even other races outside of that where he's been able to outrun the top athletes in the world. So when you start thinking about him and a few of the other guys that we have who have the ability to run fairly close to where he is, not exactly where he is, but that reaps great opportunity for us to do some things. And then on the women's side, we're always dangerous with our women, and you never know what our women are going to do. And in the mixed relay, you always have a chance to shine, and we can win it if we have that perfect race. And so I always remain optimistic, Mark, because I think we can get there. I think we'll be there with this team.
All right.
Who the team is, because we don't know who the team's going to be in full, but whoever we do end up with on the team is going to be a high positioned athlete who's tested themselves in the international market, who knows what they have to do to actually be a podium finisher.
Awesome. Well, check out the race in Abu Dhabi in a couple of weeks. Check out Yokohama, where that will be our final selection race. If we don't fill the spots automatically, then it goes to the discretionary choice of the powers that be. But regardless, it's going to be an amazing team. I can't wait for Paris. I think it's going to be one of the most exciting triathlon festivals you have ever seen. So Tim, thanks so much for all your hard work, your time. You're plugging away with the NCAA, plugging away with the high school teams, plugging away with the clubs. You got your hands full.
I do, but it's good stuff, fun stuff. Mark, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
All right, Mondays with Mark Allen. Hope you enjoyed that one, everybody. We'll see you next time.